Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you, this time talking episodes 19 and 20 of Season 3 of The Flash, The Once and Future Flash, and I Know Who You Are. I know, or I know your name, whatever. All in all, these are both pretty good episodes. So let's just kind of get right into it. Now, with The Once and Future Flash, hang on. Yeah, I Know Who You Are. That's the second. I tend to be kind of wary about these sort of future stories where heroes go into the future and the future sucks, because writers can never really resist the temptation to make the future as sucky as possible. Now here, it's not a great future, but it's not this god awful mess. I guess it is kind of a god awful mess, but it's not like the writers are just deliberately trying to make everything as miserable as possible. Like, for example, you notice that HR, for all intents and purposes, is actually living a pretty good life. I mean, somehow people aren't making a big deal about the fact that the Earth 1 Harrison Wells of their Earth is supposed to be wanted for murder, but they've pretty quickly chosen to ignore that after the first, third of the season or so. So, no big deal there. But, I mean, things aren't great. I mean, it sounds like, there's a lot of crime in Central City. Top and Mirror Master are not only more powerful, they're basically the kings and queens of town. Cisco and Barry are both pretty messed up people. Cisco having had his arms frozen off by Killer Frost. Joe is alienated from Barry. Barry is just this pathetic sad sack. And, Julian is basically Killer Frost's keeper. I mean, it's not great, but I've certainly seen worse. The old man Logan future from the Marvel comics, that one really jumps to mind. And again, it's not that really terrible futures are necessarily bad. The Days of Future Past timeline from the X-Men comics is a great example. Another good example for me of when they do stories like this, right, are like the 2099 universe from Marvel. The world of 2099 does suck pretty badly, but it's not completely awful. That's really the kind of big thing here. Is that I just hate it when they always make everything completely awful. I mean, a bad future, sure, can be very interesting, but just don't turn it into misery porn is basically what I'm saying here. And I do like in Once and Future Flash what they do with Barry, where at first he's just really, okay, look, I'm just here for information, and that's it. And at first it looks like he's not going to get anywhere, and just sort of this reaction Barry gets, especially when he sees his future self as sort of broken shell of a man. And he even gets the message like, "Oh yeah, we never did figure out who Savitar was," which is basically about the worst possible news he could have gotten. But I do also like that even in this really bad situation, like Cisco, who has suffered just as much as anybody, and in a lot of ways more than anyone else, refuses to give up because he still believes in Barry. He still believes in the Flash, and he even tries to manipulate Barry a little bit there, and Barry sees through it pretty quickly, but he doesn't hold it against Cisco, because he knows that Cisco is doing this from a good place, that he is doing this because he wants to do good. And, manipulating your friends in order to do good is a really dicey subject here, but it does speak very well to Barry and Cisco's relationship, that Barry, again, doesn't hold this against Cisco. And it also makes him realize that he's been kind of selfish. Barry being selfish, now that's something we really need to think about. Ugh. Sorry, guys. I've noticed lately that my posture has been doing very bad when I'm doing these videos, and I'm trying to not be so bad about that. I don't know if you could hear my neck popping when I was doing that, but ooh, nasty. But anyway, he does realize by the end of the episode, it's like, hey, it doesn't matter if this is only a potential future. I'm the Flash, and I can't let things stay this way. So, I mean, of course, in pretty short order, he gets the band back together, and they take down Top and Mirror Master and get, that reality's Barry back up off his butt. And basically saying, it's like, you know what? Okay, I'm not in a good place, but enough is enough. I need to get back out there and start being the Flash again. So whatever might happen with this potential future, most likely erased the second Barry goes back, at least it ends on a good note. And they do get the information they need to get in contact with, what's her name, Tracy Brand, which is apparently a character who's like original to the show. She's not particularly based on anyone from the comics. I just keep thinking, wasn't there like a major character in the Legion of Superheroes whose last name was Brand? Wasn't that like the name of their sponsor? Who, if I remember correctly, actually turned out to be like the Martian Manhunter who was still alive after 1,000 years. But that again, that's probably just a coincidence. So anyway, getting back to I Know Who You Are. Now I really like how this episode starts off with, Barry's like, okay, I know who you are, and going to confront Savitar. How exactly Barry knew where Savitar would be is a mystery, but okay, he knows himself pretty well. It's like, well, if I was evil and whatever, where would I hang my hat? And the whole crux of this, of course, is that Savitar is Barry, and this is something that a lot of people, including myself, have really been suspecting since the very beginning of the season. I mean, they did have a storyline from the comics where Barry fought a future version of himself. I've read that story, and frankly, I didn't particularly care for it. But sort of some visual touches from that worked their way into Savitar, which was one hint. And the biggest hint, I think, was just from the first episode where Eobard Thawne says, "This time you're the villain, Flash." And, that's exactly right. He was exactly right. This time around, Barry is the villain. And now a lot of things that Savitar had said, and a lot of his contradictions make sense. Like, he was the first speedster, which we sort of were to take like, oh, there's been speedsters around for like 1,000 years or something like that. But that's not the case, that Barry was the first speedster. Now, what this means in terms of whether or not they'll ever bring Max Mercury onto the show, that's a little bit of a But, this is the sort of thing that they can always retcon. I mean, we'll see. Because Max Mercury is a guy who got his speed powers, if I remember correctly, it was like sometime in the 1800s is when he got his powers. But again, they can always just say it's like, yeah, in the timeline that Savitar came from, Max Mercury never appeared. I mean, there's a million ways to get around. And, again, I'm sorry if you're a little tired of hearing me harp on about how much I want Max Mercury to be on the show, but I really do like the character of Max Mercury. I loved the first 2 years that Mark Waid was the writer of Impulse, which was a spin-off of The Flash. Really did a lot to flesh out Max Mercury and Bart Allen as characters, and really did a lot to cement me as a fan of The Flash. Never mind all the actual Flash comics that I read. And and plus there's the whole, it's like, Mercury Labs, there's got to be something there. There's just got to be. Anyway, getting right back into it. What's going on with everybody else? I did like a lot of the things here, like the reaction to Cisco and Julian are at odds. Cisco does not let the fact that Julian was a moron and did not immediately stick that necklace back on Caitlin go. And Julian is pretty quick to get on his case. It's like, hey man, you could have stopped her, but you effed it up. And I like how eventually they do kind of come together again with Julian. He's like, look man, I believe in you. And considering how at odds Julian has been with a lot of people on Team Flash, hearing him come out and sort of really make a statement like that, especially to somebody like Cisco, really says a lot about how much he's grown as a character. And I'm just speaking of Killer Frost. Oh my god, the visual effects in this episode. It's just sort of like, I'm watching this and I'm like, oh my God, why couldn't they have done this with Iceman in the X-Men movies? This is so absolutely what I always wanted to see from Iceman in the X-Men movies. I mean, not that what they did with him was necessarily bad, it's just sort of like, yes, this is what that character from the comics should have been doing. What I always imagined seeing this character in the comics doing these sort of things would be like, and now here it is on The Flash. So yeah, and also it does a nice job of reminding you, like, man, Killer Frost is not somebody that can be taken lightly. She is somebody that can present a real incredible threat to Barry. And of course, Savitar turning out to be evil Barry makes perfect sense as to why Caitlin would immediately be willing to follow his lead. Nothing really particularly huge to say about this whole thing with Joe and his girlfriend. It's just nice to see that Joe is finally putting the loss of his wife behind him and is ready to move on. I mean, that's great. You know, it does show that even in the midst of terrible circumstances, that life goes on. People fall in love. People put tragedies from their past behind them and go on with their lives. Because that's life. And, well, it's never easy, but putting the tragedies of one's past behind you and moving on with your life is what everybody has to do. Because if we don't, then those things, they haunt us. And there are countless people who've just simply been destroyed by their inability to put the past behind them. And of course, it's easier said than done, but you know, what other choice do we have? You know, I'm reminded this moment, as completely random as it seems, of Cowboy Bebop. And there was one of these episodes, or maybe it was more than one episode, where at the very end of there was this little title card, and it said in English, "You're going to carry that weight," and that's something that sort of leaps to my mind here, is that the inability to put the past behind us. That's a good way to think of it. Until you learn to do that, until you learn to put things behind you, you carry the weight of those things with you. But anyway, so getting back to the whole, hey, Savitar is evil future Barry. Well, one thing that's been a recurring theme this episode, right from the very beginning, is Barry doing things for selfish reasons. I mean, he alters history again for selfish reasons. He goes into the future for, of course, to save Iris. Yes. But again, it's also to save himself from losing her. This really reminds me of kind of one of the big things that I've seen some stuff that I've read lately about talking about like philosophy and whatnot, and applying it to movies and whatnot. Like, and this is just the inability to let go of things. And basically what this means is that in life, good things and bad things happen to us. And that when bad things happen to us, we just have to accept that they have happened to us and move on with our lives, going back to what I was talking about earlier. Now, sure, it's easy to sit there and say, oh man, I really wish this didn't happen to me. Well, I mean, and that's, of course, the natural human reaction to it all. But ultimately, that accomplishes nothing. It accomplishes nothing. And when we do lose things, particularly when people die, I mean, it's very, of course, it's natural that we feel that way. Like, oh man, I really wish this person I cared about didn't die. But sitting there and holding on to it does us no good. It only causes us even more pain. And to sort of illustrate a point here, think about Star Wars. I mean, Anakin turned evil because he feared losing Padme. And it's understandable that he would not want his wife to die. But it was his inability to accept that he might lose her that ultimately made him evil and destroyed her. So it's not that we take an oh well attitude to the idea that we might lose someone that we love. That's not the idea there. But we all know that everybody's mortal, and that people that we care about are going to die. And it's easy to not want to think about that. But if we just accept, yes, someday the people I care about, my parents and grandparents, and especially older people I care about who are older than me, are going to be gone. And again, it's understandable we wouldn't want to think about this. But if we do take time to think about it, to use a stolen term, negative visualization, if we think about what our life would be then, without them, it makes us more willing, more likely to appreciate them while we're here. And again, Barry's inability to accept the fact that he might not always have Iris there in his life is a part of what drives him to do all of these selfish things. Yeah, sure, part of it is to save Iris, but also part of it is Barry trying to spare himself the pain of losing her. And again, this is a perfectly understandable thing to do. But sooner or later, one of them is going to die, and the other is going to be left alone. And that's the thing. You can't hold on to things like that. It's like when the inevitable happens, you just have to accept it. Now, granted, it's a superhero show where you can travel in time and alter reality and all those other things, but it's still Barry monkeys with the universe for the sake of his own happiness. And as the Speed Force has pointed out, you don't get to go around monkeying with the universe for the sake of your own happiness. This is exactly what was basically Merlin and Dark and Reverse Flash were trying to do over on Legends of Tomorrow. The whole season was alter reality for the sake of their own happiness. And was repeatedly shown time and time again when the Legends attempt to monkey with reality for the sake of their own happiness. Now, they can say it's like, oh, I'm doing this to save someone's life. Well, again, yes, and under normal circumstances, saving someone's life is good. But you're really not doing it for them. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it so that you don't have to feel the pain of their loss, so that you have that person in your life. So it comes from acting from a place of ultimately selfishness rather than altruism. And when we start to think of our own selfishness as good, then we're going down a pretty bad road. And Savitar is the ultimate realization of Barry's selfishness. So here it is. Barry has to stare his own selfishness in the face and deal with it. I'm kind of reminded of like from the Persona games, especially Persona 4, where the characters confront their shadows, the side of themselves that they try to push away and repress. Well, in a lot of ways, Savitar is Barry's shadow. Also, Persona 5 is absolutely awesome. I love it so very much. So we'll see where all of this goes. So guys, with that said, we're going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at HoosierJedi, and also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.